Alright, welcome everyone. This is Ned from Caspio. If somebody can just do me a quick favor and use the chat window, let me know that you can hear me okay. That way I know the audio is working properly on my end. So go ahead and just type something in, let me know that you can hear me, so that I know that I can begin. Hello, welcome back. I see a lot of familiar names. Great, okay, well welcome back everyone. Today is our intermediate class. If you haven't attended the basic session yet, I do recommend that one first. It's offered Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday. Today is a bit more of an advanced session, so we have an intermediate class, and we have quite a few people in today's session, so what I'm going to do is keep the line muted. If you end up having any questions, if we have the time, I will handle maybe one or two questions throughout the class, but we are going to save plenty of time at the end for a Q&A session. So let's see how we do. If I have the time throughout the class, I will try to answer your questions as fast as possible. If not, we will definitely get to all of the questions towards the end. Okay, so let's begin. Let's take a look at the agenda for today's session. We're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the interface. About architecting our application. It's very important to understand how you can structure out your app before you start building it inside Caspio. It really helps move things along a little bit faster and much more effectively before you start building it inside the actual platform. We'll spend a few minutes talking about user tables, authentication, which is password protection, access based on user role. So if I log in, let's say as an employee, I'll be able to see certain information, and if I log in as a manager, I'll see more information or have the ability to edit, for example. Then we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how we can stamp records with user IDs. So if, let's say, a student or an employee logs in and they submit a record, as a manager you would like to be able to see who was the employee that made that submission. So we're going to stamp the employee's ID once we submit the form. And lastly, we're going to spend some time talking about data page folders, how we can create these folders to help us stay organized inside our Caspio account. Let's recap really quickly on what we do in the basic session. So if you attended the basic class, you would have learned how to build a submission form to submit data to the database table, and also a report that allows you to search, see the results, and drill into details. Okay, now I made some modifications to the details page, but it's not important for today's class. If you do not know how to build an input form and the report, if you're just starting out at Caspio, I really do recommend the basic class first before today's session, because you really should have the knowledge on how to do that first prior to today's class. Okay, and today we're going to learn how to password protect our report and form, and when we submit the form we're going to learn how to stamp employee's ID into the table so that we know who was the employee that made that submission. Alright, so now before I go into Caspio and show you how to build user tables, let me show you what I do and how I structure out my application before I build it inside Caspio. Okay, there are a couple of things to point out here. With any tool that you choose to go with, if it's Caspio, if you're hand coding it from scratch, there's really three types of applications you can build, and they fall into three different categories. They are public-facing applications, internal applications, and a mix of both. So your application is going to fall in any one of these three categories. Okay, it just depends on the application that you're building. Some examples that fall under public are salary database, maybe a mugshot database, and perhaps a recipe guide. These applications are public facing, which means you do not require a login screen for you to view the data. Okay, and these apps are very popular amongst our media clients. Over 90% of all the US newspapers publish data using Caspio, and there's a good chance you may have stumbled upon your own local newspaper website looking at a Caspio report without realizing it was actually built using the Caspio platform. So let's take a quick example, or let's take a quick look at how one of the newspapers uses Caspio to publish recipe guide. San Francisco newspaper, or San Francisco Chronicle, if we were to go to food and recipes, and then from here we'll click on go to search recipes. Okay, right here in the middle you'll see Powered by Caspio. So this search form was built using the Caspio platform. And if this branding wasn't here, you would have no idea that this was built using the Caspio platform, because it's seamlessly embedded inside their web page. Here's a list view report underneath, and this is all being driven from Caspio. All this data that you're seeing here is being pulled from the Caspio table and seamlessly embedded on their website. Now, the whole purpose of a public-facing application, if you do your SEO correctly, is to place a lot of ads, and you're hoping that somebody who goes to google.com and wants to look up an almond cake, that this will come up first on the search results. And if you get a lot of hits, perhaps they'll click on one of these ads to generate some revenue for San Francisco Chronicle newspaper. Okay, so that's the whole idea. If you get a lot of visitors with the public data, perhaps somebody's going to click on this ad, and then you can start generating revenue, depending on what kind of data you're displaying on your website. Okay, so that's one example of how you can build a public-facing application. Okay, internal applications are more applications that require a login. So there's nothing you can do until you can actually log in using your credentials, such as email and password. And once logged in, then you have the ability to input data, look at reports, assign tasks to other members, and so on and so forth. Okay, so one example could be a CRM app. We can have project management. We could have task management. And the application that we're building is called Manage Customer Forecast. So the application that we started building yesterday, if you look inside my Caspio account, the application is called Manage Customer Forecast. And this is going to be an internal application. And you'll see by the end of the class today how this is going to change into an internal application. And then we have a mix of both, public/internal, and two examples that I always use are Facebook and Realtor.com. So these two types of applications contain both public interface and internal. Okay, so here's Facebook.com. And from here you'll notice that they have a login screen because there's a lot of functionality that's password protected. And once you log in, then you can add friends, search other friends, send messages, etc. But they also have this registration form that's public facing, meaning that whoever goes to Facebook's home page will be able to fill out this form because it's open to the public. And then once you register, well, then you can log in and you have access to all the other functionality. Okay, so this is the reason why this one is public/internal. And one more is Realtor.com. And Realtor.com allows you to search for real estate. You can see the search form here on the home page. And this search form can be built using the Caspio platform as well. Okay, this is not really too fancy. So if you search for a specific location, you're going to see a list view results page, and notice this is all still public facing. I did not have to log in to view any of this data. Okay, so I'm looking at these properties, and let's say I want to save this listing so I can look at it later. The moment you click on this link, it's going to open up a form, and it's asking me to register for an account so that we can link this property to our user ID. Because the application needs to know who does it need to link this property ID to the registered member. If you have an account, you can log in, and then it's going to automatically link this property to your account once you log in. Which means next time you log into your account, with your email and password, you'll be able to see quote unquote saved listings, all of the properties that you saved for your account ID, so you can pull them up later much quicker and you don't have to search for them again. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. This is a public/internal application. It doesn't matter which way you begin. You can start as an internal app, and then as a phase 2, you can add a public interface to it. Or vice versa. You can begin the public-facing application and then add internal. Okay, so really there's no right or wrong way to begin, but when you release your first application, for example version 1, it may just be internal, but then later on you're adding some public aspects to it. Okay? After you've identified which category your application falls under, I'm just going to grab my application name, paste it here. The next step, since this is going to be an internal application, is to list all the user levels that your application is going to have. And in our example, we're going to have 2 user levels. We're going to have the management and we're going to have the employees. Now, depending on what you're building, you might have a supervisor level, which is a middle tier user level. In my application, I'm just going to have the management and the employees. And after you've identified all the user roles, you're then going to list bullet points to what each user role can do inside that application. So when an employee logs in, I want the employee to add new customer forecast. And every time you're adding something, that's going to require a submission form, because the submission form is an input form. It adds data to the database table. Okay. I also want the employees to view, manage their own forecast, and that's going to be a report. So every time you're reviewing something or managing, you're no longer inputting data. You're going to need a report to display the data on the web. I think I had a question here. Bear with me for 1 second. Yes, if anybody else wants this notepad when I'm done, let me know. I can email you the notepad afterwards. Just let me know, and I will send that over to you after class. And why is this useful? Well, every time you add a bullet point, that's usually going to translate into an additional data page inside your account. So when you're done putting all these bullet points for all of your user roles, you're going to know more or less how many data pages you'll need or how many resources you'll need for that application. And the more bullet points you add, the bigger the application, the more the data pages. Okay? Well, this is it as far as the functionality for my employees. I just want them to be able to add new customer forecast and manage their own customer forecast. That's all I want my employees to do. Management, when they log in, I want them to add new employee. And again, when you're adding something, you need a submission form. So let's say a manager logs in and we hire a new employee to the staff. I want to be able to add that employee to the user table. So I need a submission form so I can add their name, their email, and create their password. So now the employee can log in and start adding forecast and managing their own forecast. Once I can add an employee, I also want to be able to view manage all employees. So that's going to be a report, which means that I can pull up an employee account and I can change their password, change their email. I can delete them from the database. That way they can no longer log into the application itself. And lastly, view, manage all employee submitted forecasts. And that's going to be a report. So when an employee adds customer forecast, managers should be able to view all of those submissions using a report. Okay? So this application is going to give us a total of 5 data pages. And it's a very, very simple app. It's really not too sophisticated or robust in any way. It's a good starting point for you guys to learn from a simple application, but of course you can always add on top of that. You can add a maybe a calendar to see all the appointments that the employees are submitting. You could add a chart if you have numerical data for the forecast. I can create a chart here for the manager to be able to see which one of the employees is performing and who's not performing in terms of what kind of forecast or revenue they're bringing in. Okay, so simple as that. Let's now go inside our Caspio account and let's figure out how we can build that user table to support both the managers and the employees. Okay, so that will be the next step. So inside Caspio, we're going to go open up our application. And notice something interesting here. We already have 2 data pages built. If we go to this tab here, in our beginning class, we built the ability to input customer forecast, and we also have the report, which are the 2 data pages for the employees. Okay, so we already built these 2 data pages. Okay, and we have them both deployed on our website. So as an employee, I can add new customer forecast. Here's my forecast field. And I can also search and view all the submitted forecasts for each one of the customers. Okay, but we're going to have to make a few modifications here because when I add a contact, I need to stamp my employee ID so that we know who was the employee that submitted that forecast. Okay, so we'll get there. All right, let's go to tables. And what we need is we need a user table that's going to store all of the employee credentials. Okay, so we're going to create a new table. And just bear with me for a minute. I'm going to list all the fields and then I'll explain why I'm making all the changes that I'm making. Just bear with me for one moment here while I add all the fields. And one more. Okay. One important thing here to note is when you're building an internal application, you only need one user table. So if there's one thing that you want to write down from today's class, if you're building an internal application only, you just need one user table. And that table is going to store all of your credentials for your admins, your managers, your employees, your supervisors, and so on. However, if you're building, let's say, an application that has students, teachers, managers, so this is more of a public/internal application. If you have if you have students and teachers, you don't want to mix those 2 user groups into a same table. In that case, it's okay to have 2 different tables. One table for your students and one table for your teachers. And you're going to store their information in 2 different tables because if you mix it all into one table, it's going to be really difficult for you to tell who the student is and who the teacher is. Okay? You have students one table, you have teachers another table, and then you could have a table for your internal managers that are managing both the students and teachers. So then in that case, you have 3 different user tables. Okay? One for your internal employees, one for your students, and one for your teachers. Just depends on the structure, really. It's up to you if you have a preference. You could put the students and teachers into the same table, but I recommend putting them into a different table. Okay? Are there any questions on that? I just want to make sure that's clear. I'm going to unmute the line here because that's very important to note. Okay, good. And since we're building an internal application, as you can see, I only need one user table. So then inside Caspio, here's my user table. I just added all of my fields. So let's go through it. Employee ID, I made that an auto number, and you can see if you make it an auto number, it's automatically going to be unique, which means that every employee ID is going to be different. In a database environment, when you have users, best practice, it's always recommended that each user is assigned some kind of a unique ID because you want to relate that table later on to another table, into a database relationship. To put it in better perspective, here in the United States, we have social security numbers, each one of us. And this is how the government can pull up all of our information based on that social security number. And every social is different or unique. Okay? Name is self-explanatory. Email, you can see I made that unique because I'm going to use the email as my username to log in. It's part of my credential login. So the email has to be different. You can't have the same email per password. Okay, so I want to make sure the emails are different. Password, I could have left it as text255, but it's much better for more secure. You want to select password from smart type because it's going to encrypt the password on table level. So if somebody ever breaks into your Caspio account and they open up the table, they'll never know what the passwords are. It's going to be encrypted. And you'll see in just a minute here how it encrypts the password. Access level. So this, you just need one field to define who the managers are, who the supervisors are, who the employees are. You just need a single field. Okay, it doesn't matter how many user levels you have. One field should suffice. And I also like to add a status field. And I use a Boolean yes or no checkbox because I want the manager to have the ability to make an employee inactive or active with that checkbox. So if a manager unchecks the box, the employee is not going to be able to log in. However, if the manager checks the box, then yes, that employee will be able to log in and start adding their customer forecast and so on and so forth. Okay, just adds a little bit more privileges to the management side to have the ability to manage the employees. Okay, when you're done, click on Save, and let's call this table TBL Employees. Alright, so that's our table. I'm going to open the table now, and I'm going to add a few employees here just so we can have some dummy data to test. We'll say Walter White. And you'll see now when I add my password, you can see how it's encrypted. But if I left the text255, then I would have been able to see the actual password. We'll make Walter be the manager of the application, and we'll give him active status, which means he's going to be able to log in. Let's add Skylar White, password test, and we'll make Skylar be the employee, also active status, and we'll add one more, Jesse Pinkman, and we'll say Jesse. Hey, I'll change that later. And we'll also make Jesse be the employee and active status. Okay, so you can see how the auto number populates here on the left hand side. It's going to be unique, and every employee will have a different employee ID. It's going to have that sequential number 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Okay. All of our employees are currently active with the status checkbox. We know who the manager is. We know who the employee is based on this access level field. We have all of our emails. You can see that all the emails are different. They need to be unique. And we have all of our employee names inside this table that we call TBL_employees. The next step is to go to Views. And depending on how many user levels your application has, you're going to need that many views. Okay, and all the views are going to do is filter out who the active employees are and who the active managers are. Okay, so let me show you here. We're going to set up our first view. And the view that we're going to call this is going to be Filter Active Managers. And that's all I want this view to filter. Just active managers from that employee table. Okay, so we're going to select our employee table here to the right. We're going to click Next. And now inside the Criteria tab here at the top, you're going to see this window where we have 3 elements here on the left hand side, and we have our canvas here on the right side. These brackets, or these little puzzle pieces, allow us to create AND or logic, what we wish to display inside that view, and how we filter the data using AND or OR. This is the original anchor. You cannot move this guy anywhere because one always has to be here. Okay. However, you can snap these other guys in place, and these are the field elements. So I can put a field element in here, and I can call out the field from that employee table. Okay. If you want to remove them, just hover over the trash can and release, and you can see how it deletes all of the elements except for that original one. So what we told this view to do is to filter active managers, okay, based on the employee table that we just built. So then what I want to do in the criteria tab is move this field inside this bracket, call out the access level field equal to manager. Okay, I also want one more field in here, field status, and I want the status to be checked. So basically what you're telling the application or this function here is if access level equals to manager and if status is checked, if both are true, you will now see just Walter's information inside the view, because the view is looking that the status is checked and that the access level equals to manager. Alright, so that's one view, filter out active managers. Second view, we need to filter out active employees. So click on new again, filter active employees. Based on the same employee table, go to the criteria tab, and again you're going to do the same thing. Access level this time equals to employee, and status is checked. Finish. And now this view is going to show me Skylar and Jesse. Okay? So again, all I'm using the views right now is to filter from the employee table who the active employees are and who the active managers are. Okay? And after you've built your views, the last step here is to go to Authentications and to build your authentications on top of the views. So one authentication for active managers and the other one for active employees. So let's build a new one. So let's start off with active employees first. So here's the view that we just built. Okay, we can select it now from this drop-down menu. Filter active employees. You can use the Express Radio button for a quick login screen. You know, in 6 years that I've been at Caspio, I've never used Express once myself. I always go with Custom because it gives you a lot more customization options. I also always go with Recommended to log into the application for authentication. However, you can also use ID services. So if you want your employees to log in using their Gmail account or Twitter or Facebook or OpenID, you can select this radio button. Or this one is a combination of both. Okay, so this one includes the Caspio credentials and social media, which is exactly what Realtor.com is using. So if you remember from here, if I click on login, there's the login through Facebook and also through Realtor.com. I think I have a question. Just bear with me for one moment. Sound is kind of breaking on my side. Sorry about that, Richard. Is anyone else experiencing any sound issues? Okay, that's not good. At least you can hear me. Not sure why the sound is not working the way it's supposed to. Static on the mic. Let me try something here on my end. Okay, well that's good. Just gonna try something here. What I find that helps is that you can, if you mute. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I really don't have any answer for that. I don't know why, but hopefully we can get through it like this. Okay, Sounds good. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why there's a sound issue. This session is actually going to be available later on. We currently have, just want to point this out because it's important, in our knowledge base, if we go to pre-recorded live training, we have the session here available on demand. However, this session is outdated. Okay, this session is outdated and it needs to be replaced. So today's session is actually being recorded, and at the end of the day, you're going to see today's session on our knowledge base. Okay. All right, so let's close that. I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, it's actually as far as possible from my mouth. The piece is actually very far away. I try not to keep it too close. But anyway, let's move on so we can cover all of this from today's session. Today we're going to focus just on recommended. Okay. We have the email field and we have the password field to log into the application. If you're worried about your data, if you have sensitive data, if you'd like to include an additional login field, you can click on this plus icon. I will send you the link to the video probably tomorrow because it takes a while for YouTube to upload these videos. So you'll probably have that video available tomorrow and I can email you then. Okay? Let's add another authentication field to our login screen by clicking on this drop-down option, and let's include the name along with the email and password, and you click on finish here or add, and notice now we can move this field up and your login screen will require for the user to put in their name, their email, and their password before they can view the data inside the application. If you think this is an overkill, too many login fields, you can simply remove the name field and then you're back down to just email and password. Now label says username and we have to put our email address into the field. I like to rename the label to say email. It's a bit more clear. And then password is just going to be password. Okay, when you're done, click on create and let's call this authentication employee. Auth for authentication, and there's our employee authentication, which was built on top of our active employee view. Okay, let's build our second one, which is our filter active managers, custom, recommended, email, and click on create, and this one is going to be manager authentication. Alright, once you get to this point, you can give yourself a little pat on the shoulder. This is really as difficult as it gets to creating a user foundation. And this is really if you're building an internal application with one user table. Okay. Now when you have your authentications built, we have two of them, we can start applying these authentications to our data pages. Okay. These two data pages are still public facing. If you go to my website here, you can see when I refresh, the form is still public facing. There's no login screen, and the report is still public facing. There's no login screen. So to fix that, now that we're under data pages, I can edit my input form. Click next until you get to the second screen. And there's this thing that's called access and security. Enable this checkbox and now you can select your authentications that we just built. So here's our employee authentication, and we know that this submission form should only be accessed by the employees, not the management. So we select the employee authentication, you're going to click finish, and now when you refresh your form, you get to see that login screen. Now the reason why this is pre-filled is because my browser is caching from the prior sessions. I need to clear the cache. Okay, so this is how easy it is to apply the login screen. Now I just want to point out one thing here that's pretty cool, that if we go back to authentications for the employees, and if we edit that authentication, and let's say you decide to add an additional login field, Keep forgetting about that. Authentication field, name, click add. Let's move the name to the top. Okay, now you require 3 login fields. Save your changes, refresh your website, and now you need to put in the name. I need to rename my label actually. So you need to put your name, your email, and your password before you can log into the account. A lot of users have a thing that's called PIN number because they like to put the PIN, email, and then password if you have sensitive data. Okay, let's remove that field from the authentication. Refresh. Okay, we're back down to 2 login fields. But my report, if we tab over, you can still, it's still public facing. So I need to edit that data page as well. Not just the submission form. Click next. Restrict access based on the employee authentication. Okay, and you click finish. And now both data pages are going to be password protected. If you tab back and forth, you're going to see that email and password credentials. Okay. Sometimes when you're building applications, you're going to have an authentication that you would like to give both employees and managers, not just one or the other. If you look at my authentications here, this one is just for the employees and this one is just for the managers. What if you have mutual reports that you want to be able to access by both the employee and the manager, right? You don't want to have to build 2 different data pages for that. You just need one data page and you apply all access authentication to that data page. And now the employees and the management can view it. All right, so let me show you how to do that. We're going to need to set up a third view. Okay, so that's a question that I'm going to have to probably save until the end of the class. It seems a bit more elaborate, so we're going to save that until the end. So this view is filtering just active employees, and this view is filtering just active managers. Okay, I'm going to build one more view. Filter all active employees. So again, based on the employee table, criteria tab, and this time we're not going to include the access level field because we don't care if it's a manager or an employee. We just care that it's an active employee with the status checked. Okay, click finish, and this view is going to list all 3 of our employees, and it's just looking that the checkbox is checked in the employee table. I now need to go to my authentications, click on new, select that all active employee view, custom, recommended, email. We have our password field and we're going to click on create and we're going to call this all access authentication. Again, that's something that we're going to save those questions until the end of the class. If you have different states, you're going to have some kind of a state ID in your table, and based on that ID, when whoever from that location or that region logs in, it verifies their ID to view the data just based on their state. I'll have to think about that. I have never actually had to put together something like that. I gotta think about it a little bit. Okay. So now we have this all access authentication. When you go to data pages, and let's say you're building a new data page, you can apply now just the management, just the employees, or that all access authentication. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know. Are there any questions so far based on what we're doing? You can see that on the web, if I try to log in as Walter, who the manager is, I cannot log in because this is authenticated based on the employee authentication. However, if I log in as either Skylar or Jesse, I should be able to log in, and now I can add data. I can look at data using a report and tab back and forth, and I can also log out. Takes me back to the login screen. I think that's a quick question I can answer there. Let me see it. Does that one login authenticate throughout all data pages using that access? Yes. So that login screen will allow both the employees and managers to log in and view whatever data page you apply that authentication to. Okay, but sometimes, of course, you're going to have just one or the other. Only the management should be able to see certain information, so you only want to apply the management authentication. You don't want the employee to be able to log into that data page. But all access will give access to everyone. So all the employees and the management should be able to log in with their credentials. Okay. Okay, so you want me to go over that one more time? Is that what I'm hearing? Anjali. Yeah, so the all access login. So basically, let me take you from let me back up here a little bit. Your employee table is going to contain all of your employee information, right? You have your managers, they're identified based on this access level field in your employee table, and they all have an active status so far. Okay? The views, all the views are doing is filtering who's who from the employee table. Okay? This view is filtering just active employees. This view is filtering just active managers, but this view is filtering active employees and managers. Okay? Authentications are built on top of these views. So this authentication just allows employees to log in. This authentication just allows managers to log in. But this authentication allows both the management and employees to log in using their credentials. And depending on what data page you apply to what authentication, you're going to have either everyone being able to access that data page or just the employee or just the manager. If you look at these two data pages that I've authenticated, so this input form, let me just finish my sentence here, bear with me. You can see that I only used employee authentication, and I was only able to log in as an employee through the login screen. Right? Had I applied all access authentication, now both Walter and the employees will be able to log into that form if I used all access authentication. Okay, but I'm only limiting this submission form to just employees. So this submission form, again, if I try to log in as Walter at test.com, test, I'm not going to be able to log in because it's only authenticated based on the employee authentication. Okay? Now let me take a look at the question. What I meant is that the employee once logged in, it only needs that one login to see any data page that is authorized for the day. Yeah, that's a good question. Right, so when you log in as an employee, let's say I log in as Jesse, all the other data pages that are authenticated based on the employee authentication, you don't have to log in twice. You're logged in for those data pages. Okay? So whatever data page you have the employee authentication applied to, you just log in once and you're going to be logged in across all of those data pages. Okay? Does it time out? Well, it will time out if you define that in the authentications. I didn't cover that, but if I go over here to this tab, and let's say we edit the employee authentication, if you scroll down to the advanced settings, we have something that's called timeout and redirection. Right? Timeout and redirection here. So we can change this. Timeout after, we have up to 1 week here. If you need more time here, we can do it through the back end. You just have to let our development team know. but within Caspio's standard features, you can do up to 1 week or 15 minutes. So 15 minutes, designated entry page. I want to go to a new page, and let's say we want to go to google.com, and you save your changes. Actually, it needs to have HTTP. Right? So you save your changes here, and now if I'm logged in here and if I leave my computer unattended for 15 minutes and I refresh or try to search, it's going to log me out and take me to google.com or to whatever page you specify here for timeout and redirection. Also, we have the logout destination. So when you click on logout, let's go to google.com. Right? Save our changes. Watch what happens now when I refresh. And let's say I log out. It takes me to google.com. Okay? So that's when you edit the authentication. If you scroll down, before you click on create or save, there's these advanced settings below, and you can specify where you want to go in terms of timeout and redirection, and when you click on logout. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm going to have might have to stop you guys with the questions for now because I do have to move forward, but let me see if I can answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions here. Do I have to create the password, or the user is allowed to do so? No, the users can do that as well. When you build a submission form, you can have a password field in the submission form, and the users can create their own password. I'll cover that in a few minutes when we get to the management side. But no, you don't have to go to the table and add the password yourself. You can build a form, and the user can create their own password on a registration form, or you can have a submission form to create a password for another user. Okay, so if an employee has a credentials data page that only manager can see on other employees, that info on the tab. Okay, so like if an employee has a credentials data page that only managers can see on the other employees, that info. Sorry, I'm trying to understand this last question here. So if you only want the managers to see the employee information, whatever data page you build, you apply the manager authentication to that data page to view the employee info. You don't want to apply all access because then the employee will be able to log in there as well and see that information. But if you only want the manager to see it, you apply the management authentication. All right. Let us move on to the next topic. And let me go back to my page here. And let's log in as Jesse now. Alright, so I'm logged in as Jesse on both of these data pages. Are there any more questions on this topic before I move on to the next topic on how we can stamp records on the submission form? I can unmute the line here as well. Any quick questions here? Hopefully it's making sense. Alright. A little bit of practice, you guys will be able to build this yourself as well. Really, it's you build your user table, you have your views defined based on the user table, and then you just apply your authentications on those views. And from there you apply your authentications to your data pages on who has access to what. Okay? Alright, so let's move on to the next topic on how we can stamp the record. So when I submit a form as Jesse, and I make the submission, inside that customer forecast table, if I open it, alright, yes you can. Yes you can. Right now when I submit the form as Jesse, there is no way in this table that we can relate who was the person that submitted that entry. Okay, you can see all these fields here across the top. Once Jesse makes the submission, let's say 17, date created is today, name John Smith, customer, and we'll just add some forecast here. You make the submission, refresh the table, there's that entry, but again, in this table, we have no idea who was the person that submitted that entry, right? So what we need to do, if we look at our other table of the employees, in this table, we have some useful information. We have the employees' names, and we have the employee IDs. Somehow, we want to grab this information and stamp that information inside our customer forecast table. Because what I would like to do is stamp the employee's ID inside this table. Okay, so what I need to do is go to Table Design and add a field called Employee ID, which is going to be a number, because in my employee table we made that an auto number, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, and Jesse's ID is number 3. And somehow we want to stamp that ID number 3. When I make the submission, I want to stamp that ID inside this column. So every new entry will stamp Jesse's ID number 3 inside this table. So now that we added this field to our customer forecast table, we can go to Data Pages, edit our input form, which is this form right over here. And again, we just added the field to this table called Employee ID. Here's that field. We're going to move that into the submission form. And for now, I'm just going to leave it as a text field. Okay, click Finish. Refresh the form on the web, and you're going to see that Employee ID has been added. Now, it doesn't make any sense for Jesse to log in and have to manually put in his ID here every time he makes an entry. Okay, that's just tedious work. It doesn't make any sense because we already have Jesse's information inside the employee table. We have his ID. Okay, somehow we need to hide this field but still stamp his ID once Jesse logs in. Okay, so then you need to edit the data page once again. You're going to have to apply your employee authentication to your data page. Okay, and when you get to that screen to configure properties, employee ID, what you need to do is make this field hidden because we don't need to display that field. And on load, assign the authentication field called employee ID. Okay, it really helps if you work backwards to truly understand what's happening here. Authentication field is coming from over here because I enabled it. Thanks, Ken. Because I enabled it right over here. I applied our employee authentication to the data page. That's why I'm able to grab that authentication field employee ID. But if you work backwards, the employee authentication was built on top of the employee view, and the employee view was built on top of the table. This is the reason why we can grab this field from the employee table called employee ID. Okay, you're just grabbing the authentication field from the employee table. If I disable this, you can see that I can no longer select that authentication field. Okay, so let's go back and enable it again. Employee, and stamp the authentication field employee ID. Okay, again, it really helps if you work backwards because all of these three objects are linked together. View is linked to the table and authentication is linked to the view. Authentication is applied to the data page right here, and that's the reason why we can grab that field from the employee table. This is the best that I can explain it. I know it could be a little bit overwhelming and challenging to absorb it all, but this is really the best way I can explain it and the easiest way to understand. So when you click Finish now and refresh your form, you're going to see that field is no longer there, but when you make the submission, and we'll just say some forecast, prospect, and submit. Okay, so now when we go to our table and open up the customer forecast table, you can now see how we stamped Jesse's ID inside the customer forecast table. every time you make another submission. Let's say I log out and I log in as not Jesse, but we log in as Skylar, who is the other employee. And Skylar is going to submit the form as well. Customer, some forecast, submit, refresh, scroll down. You can see how we're stamping Skylar's ID now inside this table. And now we can tell, who was the employee that submitted this actual record inside the customer forecast table. Okay? And this is how we do that. And then on the report, when I go over here to this report and when I search as Skylar, because I'm still logged in as Skylar, you can see that I'm still seeing all the data. And that's not what I want this report to show me. What I want this report to show me is just my own entry based on my ID. Okay? And the entry that I made is Ben Thornton. Okay, so I should only be able to see one record here. Okay? So to fix that, we're going to go back to data pages, and we now need to edit the report. Let's go to tabular format. This is all the stuff that we built yesterday. You apply your employee authentication, you click next, and then we have this thing that's called record level security. What we have to do is enable this checkbox, and you have to link the common field between those two tables, and the common field is the employee ID field. So employee ID from the employee table and employee ID from the customer forecast table. This is the common field that's linking both of those tables. Okay, you're going to click finish, and now search again as Skylar, and I'm only seeing Ben. I can go to the table as a Caspio admin. I can go to my table here, open up the customer forecast table, and just manually say and assign, well, this belongs to Skylar, 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 Jesse, Jesse, and Jesse. And then when you save all of those changes, now Skylar is going to see 5 or 6 records in here. And then when I log out as Skylar, and if I log in as Jesse, and if I search, I'm only going to see the records that belong to me. Okay? Hopefully, hopefully you're able to digest all this information. I know it's a lot of info all at once. I usually like to do a recap towards the end, but we'll get there. This is the second topic that we cover in today's class. It's stamping records. The first topic was to create the foundation correctly based on a single user table. We have our views to filter out who is who. We have our authentications for our views, and then we applied our authentications to our data pages. The next topic was how do we stamp records in different tables based on our unique ID from the employee table. And hopefully you were able to follow along on that topic. Okay. Last thing that I want to cover in today's class is the use of these data page folders, or just these folders that we have up here. And the way you use the folders is really to help you stay organized inside your data pages. Okay. I like to use folders for all the user groups that my application has. And this application will have the employee user group, and it'll have manager user group, and it'll also have all access user group. We know that both of these data pages, if you click on properties, are authenticated based on the employee authentication, and so is this one based on employee authentication. And both of these data pages, I'm actually going to move them inside this folder. Because if you don't have these folders, you're going to end up with a long list of data pages, and it's going to be really difficult for you to find the ones that you wish to edit and work on. So to remedy that, what we do is we click on More here, click on Move, open up this application, and here's your employee folder. Let's move the second one as well into the employee folder. Okay, so you can see how it looks a little bit cleaner. Now next time you log in, you can open up that employee folder and you can see those data pages. Okay, but notice that we so far haven't built anything in the all access folder. and we haven't built anything for the management yet. We only have the employee functionality. Okay, I'm going to build one more data page before the end of the class today. So if we look at our notepad, the data page that I'm going to build is for the management to add new employees, and I'll need a submission form for that. So just open up this folder, click on New Data Page. I'll need a submission form. Okay, so I need my employee table because that's where I want to submit the employee information into. As a manager, I want to be able to add employees to the employee table. Okay, we're going to call this form Add New Employee. Restrict access. And who do you want to give access to this submission form? If you use all access, that means the employee is going to be able to add another employee. And we don't want that. We only want the management to be able to add employees. So we select Manager Authentication. Click Next. I need all my fields in my submission form. Click Next. And now the name is probably going to be required because you have to put a name of an employee into the table. The email is going to be automatically required because it's unique inside the table. Password, let's make that required. Let's just change the label so it says create password. Confirm password. Access level. You can have a text field or you can have a drop down. We only have 2 access levels here, or actually 3 access levels, all access manager and employee. And status, you have a checkbox. Check to allow employee login. Just some text after the checkbox so you know that if you check this box, the employee will be able to log in. When you're done, click Finish. And here's your third data page. I don't have a embed page to show us how this looks embedded into a web page, so we're just going to use a direct link today. And we're going to paste that direct link right over here. And now if I try to log in as Jesse, whoops. Let me try that one more time. You can see that I cannot log into the application. Only the management, and the only manager we have is Walter. And once Walter logs in, you can now start adding your additional employees to the employee table. Okay, so let's say I hired somebody new to the staff. We'll call them Carl Smith. Carl at company.com. Create password. Test access level employee. And now I'm just going to say I don't want Carl to be able to log into the application just yet. I'm going to click on submit. Just in case he has some additional paperwork that he needs to fill out before he's actually on board as an employee. Watch what's happening inside my application behind the scenes. What's happening in my employee table now. I just added this new employee to the table, ID number 4, but it's not an active employee because I didn't check that box on the web. My view for filter active employees is not going to show Carl's information. Which further means that my authentication, because this authentication is built on top of this view, if I try to log in as Carl with password test, I'm not going to be able to log in because I'm not an active employee yet. Okay? However, if I go to my table and I open up that employee table and we now say Carl should be an active employee, refresh, and let's try that one more time. Carl at company.com, password is test. I can log in as Carl, and now I have the ability to add entries or anything else. Submit. You're going to go to your table now of customer forecast, and you're going to be able to see that latest entry, including the ID number 4 that belongs to Carl. Okay. Hopefully you guys are following along. I am running out of time. Let's see, just check on the time. It's 11:05. To finish off this application, you're just going to need to build 2 more data pages, a report to view and manage all the employees that you're adding, and a report that manages and views all the customer forecast. Okay, those are the final two data pages. We don't have the time to build them today, but it should be just as easy as